My name is Christian Ashley, a seminary student and servant of God, and you are listening to the Let Nothing Move You podcast, a proud Anazal Ministries podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Let Nothing Move You podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, as we continue on to the book of Leviticus. And I mean we, because I am not alone today. Guys, he's real. He's actually here. I didn't make him up, I swear. Brandon Knight is here. How's it going, Brandon?
Hello. Yes, this is not Christian just doing a different voice. I am a real person. I feel bad because anyone else, if I would have had to reschedule and cancel with them 4 times or whatever it's been throughout this year, they would have given up on me. So I'm very thankful for Christian's persistence and perseverance through all of this. I've had a crazy year, so much going on, but it's good. We got it in before the end of the year. I guess that's what matters. This happened within a calendar year. So, but thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely, man. Like, look, I get it. Like, all the life changes you guys had to go through, moving to a new place, getting your spark back, as you mentioned on my seminary life, which you guys should go to. Like, yeah, I totally get it. I can't get angry about that.
Yeah, at least I wasn't just like, nah, I don't want to. Just like, so it's Friday night. I've got other stuff I want to do. No, it's been a good year. There's been a lot of life changes. Like you said, the biggest one recently was the move, but there's been, I started the year off ministry wise, just in a very, I don't want to say dark place, but a very low spot at the beginning of the year. And thankfully it has pivoted here second half of the year. And, actually just have a pretty big thing coming up here at the end of the year now with a local church. So we'll be interested to see how this all goes. I just posted it on Facebook. Did you even see it?
I did not.
Okay. I'm ending the year starting this Sunday doing a preaching residency with a church. So as opposed to my normal pulpit supply ministry where it's maybe like 1 week a month or maybe twice at most at one church, I'll be preaching there starting this Sunday until December 22nd. So basically until the end of the year.
Oh, that's great news. I'm so glad to hear that, Brandon.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I haven't had this kind of an opportunity before. Like I said, it's usually just like the one week, maybe 2 weeks at most. They don't want to bring me in as an interim pastor. Not because of anything about me, but because sometimes with interim pastors, after a while, the congregation is like, well, why don't we just hire the guy? And that's not the purpose of an interim pastor. So they're trying this format instead where they're going to have me do it for a couple months and they're going to try and get someone else to do for a month or two. They're doing like this more residency style because the other version of like, they just lost their pastor is what's going on. He just retired or resigned rather. He just resigned. And so the usually how this happens is like it's this rotating like someone different every week for months on end. And that just kind of creates a little bit of like it's a little disorienting, like who's going to be here this week. So we're hoping for the best for this church and praying for them and would appreciate prayer as well, because now I'm taking my very busy year adding this in, and by the way, it's the holidays because it runs until the end of the year, so it'll be great.
Of course. Yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself to the good people? Like, who is Brandon Knight? How do you justify yourself to the world?
How do I justify myself? I'm 30 now, so I do think about that a lot. How do I justify my existence now to everybody? So
that's okay. I'm turning 34 this Friday, so this is recorded way before that will happen. So don't send us that way after the fact. It's fine.
Okay.
I interrupted you.
No, you're good. So along with being this pulpit supply ministry, so I guess we'll start at the top. My name is Brandon Knight. I'm a traveling preacher in Northwest Indiana. So kind of it's also known as the armpit of Chicago because it's Chicago and then the rest of us over here, just over the border into Indiana. My wife, Claire, and our son, Cooper, who on my show is referred to as producer Cooper, we all live in Hobart. I have a bachelor's in biblical studies and a master's of arts in ministry studies through Grace College and Theological Seminary. Started out with the intention of going into pastoral ministry, but just through the course of how life has been, I've ended up in this place where I do this pulpit supply ministry. I do this pulpit supply ministry. I do the the stay-at-home parent. Fun fact, I am the stay-at-home parent for my family, and I actually have a part-time job with my local YMCA. They have a program called Ninja Zone, which is kind of like, if you've ever seen the game show American Ninja Warrior, it's kind of like that, but for children. So, a little bit safer. There's no water traps. I never tell people that. There's no water traps for people to fall into. My job is to teach kids kind of this combination of martial arts, parkour, and gymnastics all kind of rolled together. And, it's been a really good job for me, honestly. It's been a year now since I've started working there. My actual job title is Ninja Coach, and 10-year-old Brandon is still very excited about that. But it's been a really good job for me, like health-wise. It's kind of a unique way to do ministry of just creating a safe and sometimes nurturing environment for children. And it's been good for my family. Like Cooper, because I'm an employee, he gets to go to their daycare while I'm on the clock, and Claire's at work too. And that's covered. It's all good. And so, he's an only child. So he gets this, couple days a week where he gets to go play with other kids away from mom and dad, just kind of explore the world a little bit. So yeah, it's all, I'm trying to think. Ninja Coach, Pulpit Supply. Oh, podcasting. Duh. That's why we're here. I have two shows. Yeah, right. I have two shows. One of them is called My Seminary Life. I started it when I went back to seminary to finish my master's degree. And then for a while there, it was this show where after I graduated, it became this show where I was doing deep dives into topics that either you could potentially take a seminary class on, or I probably should have taken a seminary class on, or you know what? I just find it interesting. I'm just going to do this and you're going to listen. With all of the life changes that has been going on recently, especially over the past few months, the show has taken a bit of a pause. But my hope is to restart it here over the next few weeks as I move into this preaching residency I mentioned earlier, where after I preach the sermon, I will get on My Seminary Life, recap it. You're not just going to hear the sermon. I'm going to recap it. And then I'm going to talk about a related topic that didn't quite make the cut for the sermon notes. The series is called Rabbit Trail. So there's going to be a whole bunch of these coming out through November and December. Each episode is probably going to be it's going to be all over the place. There's not really one unifying thing other than it's the stuff that didn't make the cut, because, that's what a rabbit trail is. It's all this additional things that don't really contribute. You're taking 3 preaching classes. You must know what that's like right now.
It's the stuff that you want to add there because it sounds cool, but like it detracts from the purpose of your sermon. I guess I'll just have to tell someone later.
Yeah. And you know what? They're always saying the very posh Christian podcasters are always saying that sermon podcasts, when it's just a sermon, it's not as original. It's not original. It's not, creative. Well, here you go. I'm trying to be creative. You're welcome. I have another show I just launched recently called Kung Fu Pizza Party, which Christian and I are working on. Now that we've finally done this, Christian's going to come over there. It's a show where I talk about, it's going to mainly be reviews of Kung Fu movies, ninja, samurai, the whole bit. But it's also just like fun martial art content, I guess is the best way to put it. The first movie review just came out recently. By the point this episode comes out, hopefully there's been more. I'm not as strict with my scheduling anymore. as I used to be. But so yeah, that my seminary life is like my labor of love, my like hard work ministry, and then Kung Fu Pizza Party is like my all right, here we go, gonna talk about Jackie Chan for 30 minutes. Let's do this.
And it's glorious.
Oh, it's great. It's fun.
Yeah, I checked out the latest movie you reviewed because I'd never seen it before. It was on YouTube. It's like, oh man, this is fun.
Oh yeah.
Just nice to watch fun movies.
Yeah, and that's, especially those, like, I'm sure this is what everybody wanted to hear when they were going to listen to an episode about Leviticus 19 and 20. But when it comes to 70s Kung Fu movies, like, yeah, there's some like artsy ones in there, but this is like the height of grindhouse movies, the martial art movie genres and the horror genres do have a very like shared universe together, not like in the sense of like they're crossing over and all that, but like the fandoms are very similar. Two very different kinds of movies, but they're very similar. 70s, just like low budget, turn off your brain. I think Joe Day calls it like carnage candy. Like it's just nothing fancy, all fun. Yeah, so those are going to be the best movies to talk about.
And you guys want to get ahead of yourselves. There will be a crossover of horror and martial arts when we do The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires.
Yeah.
By Hammer Horror.
Hammer Horror. Because when you think martial art movies, you definitely think a British production company. And Peter Cushing, he's definitely at the top of the all-time greatest martial artist list.
Of course. Yeah. Bruce Lee, Peter Cushing. Yeah.
Peter Cushing.
top of the list. All right. Well, you got anything else before we get into these bad boys?
I think it covers it. We got a lot to go through. So, yeah. But thanks again for having me. Yeah,
absolutely. We're going to start off today, Leviticus 19, verses 1 through 4. This is going to be me reading from the ESV, not because I think it's the best, but because most of my classes are done in it, so it's just easier on me to do that. So, starting in verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and you shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves any gods of cast metal. I am the Lord your God. Take us away, Brandon. What you got?
Well, we're kind of jumping into a little bit of the reiteration of the Ten Commandments, it seems.
Yes.
So we also have this interesting like repetition here, and spoiler for the rest of the chapter. It kind of keeps coming up of this. Each one of these sections are ended off with this phrase, "I am the Lord your God." So yeah, this is going to be this chapter in particular is going to be a lot on the holiness aspect. A lot of and I think even as we move into chapter 20 as well, there's this element of God is going to present to Moses, to present to Israel, this is how I'm making you distinct from everyone else. And interestingly enough, the first one right off the bat, when it comes to this is how I'm going to make you different from everyone else, is, respect your parents. We're going to start there.
Yes. I mean, because it's one of those things, say, well, yeah, obviously I should do that, but is it so obvious? Is it so easy as you make it out to be? No, when you've got one political opinion, your father has another, your mother has that eccentricity that you don't like, and yet you have to live with her, you have to love her. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, there's a reason God points that out.
Yeah. Plus, as working with this framework of like, this is how God's making them different from the surrounding nations as they move into the land of Canaan, like that means there's a whole lot of disrespect towards parents in the land of Canaan. This is kind of my understanding of these two chapters of as God is kind of presenting a lot of stuff. It gets pretty weird when we get to chapter 20. This one is like basically a reiteration of the 10 Commandments is what we're going to be going with here. Chapter 20 is different. It's fun. And maybe it's not fair to assume that like everything is exact opposite. So Israel's needs to be respectful to their parents because the people in Canaan are not. But like there's a specific purpose in mind. That's an important thing when it comes to the law, is to understand is that God's not just like throwing things at them. That like, I don't want you to do this because I'm in charge. Like I'm calling you to do certain things, to be a certain kind of people, to make you distinct from everyone else. And I grew up, I don't know what youth group culture was like for you, Christian. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before, but the youth group culture I was in was very dismissive of the law and the Old Testament. Just very like, that's the law. We don't need to read it. We don't need to spend time with it. That's the law. We're under grace now. I remember being in a Bible study where there was a discussion going on, and somebody who was from a different group like quoted a verse from, I think it may have been Deuteronomy, and somebody who was very much in this kind of youth group culture was like, well, that's the law, so that doesn't count. So we do have to understand that there is like a purpose behind what God is saying to them. And especially here in this case, a lot of what the 10 Commandments is, as we're going to keep working through, are very timeless as we continue to follow God now as we are under grace. Just because we're under grace doesn't mean we stop being respectful towards our parents,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely youth group growing up, like leadership wise, for the most part, respected Old Testament. It was mostly the kids who are like, it's old, it's boring. I heard about that law thing I don't have to worry about anymore because of Jesus, and that's the only thing I care about. So I don't have to read that anymore.
Interesting.
Versus, yeah. And it was more of when I was studying this, reading through the Bible for the first time around that time. It's like, okay, I really don't get any of this. This is boring. I'll move on with my life. Now, as I've matured as a man, I can go back. Okay, there is a purpose here. I was just too young and dumb to understand it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the leadership was putting that forward, because even like that was from the youth pastors, some of the youth pastors in this area that were very grace forward, and maybe not in that like abusive kind of way that you see in certain pockets of Christianity, but it was very grace forward and dismissive of law. But the law was given for a purpose, and still even today as Christians, I think that we can spend time reflecting on the weirdness that is the law sometimes as we read it through our modern sensibilities. But again, going back to when God first gave this to Moses to give to Israel, like there was a plan, there was a purpose behind all this.
Yeah. If I haven't won you guys over, 19, 20 chapters into this book, like I don't know what else I can say to you that I haven't said in these past couple episodes. Like these matter, these are important, and they help bridge the gap later on between, Jesus coming and fulfilling the law. But if you don't understand the law, then how can you understand what it means to fulfill it? And like here, like specifically, like the previous chapter, God reminds his people of who he is, and then reiterates his resume to them about what he's done for them and what they are supposed to do and be as a result of this. He plainly says, you are called to be holy like I am holy. Yeah, God's asking the impossible to be done because we're men, but we're still told to seek it out anyways. And that's like one of the goals here is like, you're never going to be good enough. The law is going to tell you you're not going to be good enough, yet you're told to do it anyways.
This is a pursuit that we have. This holiness of God is still, even as, under grace in the new covenant, like we are still called to be holy for God is holy. I think that's in First Peter, I think.
Sounds about right.
That sounds about right. It's not John or Paul, which narrows it down a lot.
Immensely.
It does narrow it down a lot. This is still something that we are called to even as believers. And yeah, maybe it doesn't look like, especially when we get to chapter 20, of like some of these more intricate things that are a little bit more specific to a specific time period and culture. But in this case, come on, folks, respect your parents.
Right.
And the other one there, pretty no brainer. I have the NIV here. Do not turn to idols. Which I think that one is a safe one to assume that this was a way that God was trying to set them apart of like, I'm it, the end. Like you said, in the previous sections, kind of reiterating his resume to them. Me, I got you out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. All these idols you're going to come across. No, me. I am the Lord your God.
Yeah. Remember how I humbled every single god and goddess in Egypt?
Oh, yeah.
And they're way more powerful than the Canaanites. But we know how the story goes.
Right. Unfortunately. And if you don't, you'll be there eventually.
Yes. Getting there chapter by chapter, verse by verse. You got anything else you want to add here before we move on?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. 5 through 8. When you offer a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, you shall offer it so that you may be accepted. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it or on the day after, and anything left over until the third day shall be burned up with fire. If it is eaten at all on the third day, it is tainted. It will not be accepted, and everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity because he has profaned what is holy to the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from his people. Brandon's just saying, just don't leave your food overnight. They'll go bad. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. So, one of those things that, as for us in the new covenant that we could be very grateful for is the simplicity of our life, because in the old covenant, they did have to offer sacrifices. And so, what we see here is an example of the grace that is given to us, that Jesus Christ took our sacrifice on our behalf and covered it. So that way we don't have to continue to do this process anymore. Yeah. Because, and this is where, the people who really want to get to, well, God's just a very legalistic set of rules kind of person. This is one of those moments where, you have a case on your hands of something to point to. Keep in mind the fact that, again, I'm at least running with, I don't know what Christian has been running with, but I'm running with the idea that God is putting these commands forward for a purpose. He's not just a stickler trying to make life difficult. He is instituting here, this is how I want you to worship me in this very specific way.
Yes.
Got any thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. Completely and utterly agree. Like, yeah, even those, like, why that specific animal? Why can't we eat that? Well, maybe there is a purpose behind it, or maybe the purpose is I told you not to. That's good enough for me because I know who I'm working with here. And yeah, most of the time here, there is a specific purpose. Hey, don't have sex outside of marriage. Don't cheat your neighbor. Don't dishonor your family. Like, there are consequences to doing those things. So listen to what I'm saying. This peace offering was supposed to be like, hey, like, God, I'm making this offering to you. I can't remember which chapter in Leviticus, but it's like, we're doing this because we're cool with each other. So let's have fun. Let's celebrate. So to not follow the rules of something you're supposed to be like, hey, God, we're cool, shows that you're not cool because you're not following what he said to do.
Sure. Yeah. And that's like, that's like ruining a party. Like, if this isn't even, because sometimes we do have this idea that sacrifices and all that is like, they're all just like these heavy, weighty moments. And like, yeah, you are dealing a lot of times with, killing animals, sacrificing animals. But like, there's also this purpose of, sometimes there's this purpose of like, this is a celebration, a reminder of a good thing, our relationship, it's an anniversary kind of thing going on here, and it's, yeah. Don't beat Leviticus to death, people. There's good things here.
Absolutely. You ready to go to 9 to 10?
Let's do it.
Okay. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God.
I like this one. This one. Yeah. So there are provisions oftentimes throughout the Old Testament where Israel is called to do certain things for this purpose of, here, we're going to provide for the poor and the sojourner, traveler, same kind of thing there. And it's usually this kind of a practice where it's like, okay, when you go to harvest your grapes, don't get everything. Leave a little bit. So that way you can provide for somebody else. And I love that these are provisions that are made in the Old Testament, but somehow we lost the thread on that in like modern day cases. Granted, I don't have a vineyard in my backyard, so I can't leave grapes out for the poor.
Yes.
But to me, like, you know, I on my seminary life, sometimes I use this term pop culture Christianity, you know. And one of the big things in pop culture Christianity is how to spend your money for Jesus, right? Like Dave Ramsey and the whole 9 yards and all that kind of stuff of like Financial Peace University. And whenever I see that kind of thing, or I hear sermons on tithing, money, all that kind of stuff, I hardly ever see a point in there where it's like, and in your budget, make space to take care of the poor and the traveler. You don't really see that kind of a thing. And that thought occurred to me as I was reading this passage, because again, under grace, we're called to take care of the poor and widowed. And, you know, does travelers specifically come up? I don't recall if that specifically does come up, but taking care of the poor and widowed as the church does indeed come up. And you know what? Relatives come in town eventually. So we'll just say when relatives come in town. There's never like you know, when you're making your budget, have your tithe, you know, here's your thing for, you know, groceries, here's your, you know, your streaming money and, you know, your savings. There's never like and save 10% to give to the poor, you know, whatever that may look like. That may look different now, you know, or, you know, if your church has like a food pantry kind of thing, you know, work it in your budget to, you know, you make a specific donation to the food pantry every month, you know, that kind of a thing. Like,
yeah,
because I think, you know, I'll avoid saying certain terms because I don't know what your audience is. On my seminary life, I would be more open with some of my terms.
All over the place, man. I want you to speak like you would be talking on your show. Feel free.
Okay. So from a biblical social justice standpoint, like this is doing justice. This is taking care of people in a way that is biblical. You know, we are to seek justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. So, and I was going to not say social justice because that phrase alone loses people. People have stopped listening to whatever I've been saying for the past 20 seconds now. But social justice. Now I have summoned a liberal. It's Beetlejuice rules.
Just a minute.
But it's, you know, like this is a way that we I still think as believers can take care of people. You know, we don't have, like I said, I don't have a vineyard, and maybe somebody listening to this has a farm and can maybe work this out in a very similar way as Israel did. But I just think, how are we using the rest of our resources? You know what I mean? What do you think, Christian?
No, I completely and utterly agree. Like that whole, you know, budgeting thing, when you were saying it was like, I know what the punchline is to this before you finished. And it's like, oh, I feel bad. Like, when was the last time someone ever said that when they were talking about making a budget, you know, for a Christian family or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could argue, yeah, sure, your tithing should be going to stuff like that. You know, if you have a good, competent church, they'll be looking after the poor in the area. But what about personal responsibility? What about the extra mile of I am making sure this goes where I feel there's a need? You know, it could be anything. Like some charitable organization that deserves the money that you know is credible will use it. But yeah, you don't really hear that too much. But when I think these reveal, like compared to a God, we forget about those things, but God doesn't. Like this is specifically part of the law to account for things like this so that people are cared for in a society, in a world that doesn't love them.
Yeah.
So God, being love, enforces that rule here. One of which, by the way, this rule helps set up, you know, one of the more important parts of the book of Ruth, which helps bring even more purpose to a law that already benefited the people. But had this law not existed in the first place, we would be down one entire book of the Bible, and the Davidic line would not exist the same way. I mean, God will still get his purposes done.
Sure.
But Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. It may not be the Davidic line anymore. And I liked what you said there of like the personal responsibility aspect. Because if you're like walking away feeling a little bit like, oh yeah, we should do something about this, like in a good way, like like if you're feeling that way, like I would encourage you personally, look at it what Israel's doing here. They are taking care of the poor and the traveler right there in their backyard or wherever the vineyard is, so if you're thinking towards this, maybe don't just ship your money off somewhere far away. Like obviously there's needs everywhere, but maybe just think about your community. As believers, we're called to, to live in community with one another and to love our community. So how can you take care of the poor right there in your backyard? So yeah, these are my thoughts. And I like what you're saying there of like, this is so foundational for the plot line of scripture coming up.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there a part of the Gospels too where the disciples are taking advantage of this law and the Pharisees get angry because they did it on a Sabbath?
Yeah. They're eating with unwashed hands. They're like in a cornfield or something. It's probably not corn, but it sounds like they're in like a field, like getting stuff off of stalks and eating it. And that's when Jesus is like, it's not what goes in, but what comes out that defiles you.
Yes, that's right. It's like, it's almost like God knew what he was talking about. No, you're foreshadowing things, thousands of years before they happen.
Isn't it cool when God foreshadows? Like even God's a good writer.
If I could have a tenth of his power, I consider myself successful. Well, let's say we get to 11 and 12.
Let's do it.
All right. You shall not steal. You shall not deal falsely. You shall not lie to one another. You shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Brandon, lying's bad. Okay. You shouldn't lie. Is that what that's saying here? Like, what?
I mean,
you
shouldn't steal. Yeah, this is kind of, we're just going back to the 10 commandments here, folks. Very, very simple. Don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Cheat's not in there. Sorry. Actually, cheat will come up though. Do not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do we have a conversation about cursing? Is that where we go with this?
Oh, open it up.
So I guess I will just say this, that when it was previously taught that profaning God's name was saying bad words that get censored on TV, that's not necessarily what scripture is talking about. We're talking more about using God's name as an oath in an unnecessary way. Israel was not supposed to be using God's name as this oath, because how oath systems worked was like, basically it was a one-upping system, like double dog daring each other of, I swear on my cattle, I swear on my house, I swear, and it kind of keeps going up, and therefore, God would be the highest thing that you could cast an oath on or pronounce a curse on.
Yes.
And Israel was not supposed to do that. Now, when it comes to the whole cussing part, that's a conversation probably for a different day. But we do have to clear the air a little bit there on what exactly our terms are here.
Yeah, years from now, when we get to Ephesians, we'll get there.
You might need more. You might need a lot of guests for that one.
For specifically here, this is, as you say, it's right. It's not GD or anything like that. It is, that could be a form of it, but it's more like, hey, like, let your words be your words. It's fine. Don't swear by me. Or even like Israel will do later on multiple times. We see it through the historical narratives and the prophets. They'll say, God said that we don't have to worry about the Babylonians or the Assyrians, when the prophets are saying the exact opposite thing. And yet they'll say, this prophet here was saying what we wanted to hear. Therefore, him using God as an oath in that scenario, being like, whatever Jeremiah is talking about there, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's an idiot. God would never let Jerusalem fall. It's his city. And it happens over and over again. And like, yeah, we can go through these systematically. You just don't steal, don't deal falsely, don't lie, don't swear by name falsely. But like, we know these things are bad things.
Yeah.
So we don't need like, a 20-minute expose on every single one of these, but yet we still do them.
Yeah.
We still withhold the truth because, then I look bad if I tell the truth. So we still go, well, I said I gave the church this much, or I said I gave this person this much, but I can't afford to give the money this time around. Or, those things we know we don't need to do, and yet we do them anyways. It's the little smaller things that kind of slip in.
Yeah. It's that, little white lie, never hurt anyone kind of thing. It's like, well, we still are called to be honest. We're still called to speak the truth over one another. And what else do we have there? Stealing, like, it could be easy. When you're just like quite honest, like, just don't take office supplies, like don't take things that aren't yours. Don't. Yeah. But we still, like you said, what'd you say? Don't
mess with your hours if you're hourly.
Oh, yeah. Don't mess with your hours if you're hourly. That's a really good one. It's again, this idea of like, oh, this should be a no brainer, but it's not, Christ still had to die for me for these things.
Yes. And much more.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get
here we go
to 13 and 14. You shall not oppress your neighbor or rob him. The wages of a hired worker shall not remain with you all night until the morning. You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God. I am the Lord.
I love verse 14. It's kind of funny. But we'll do 13 first. We'll do 13 first. Systematic. Here we go. I do like I like this because this is, being financially responsible. Kind of a specific example of don't steal, don't rob your neighbor, especially where, Israel is being told time and time again to love their neighbors, to take care of the poor, to take care of the stranger, the traveler. Like, okay, don't steal from your neighbor either. Just to be clear, they also are, show love to them. But also, like, if you're paying people to do something for you, pay up. Don't, it's kind of this like, don't withhold the money for no reason. It's kind of how I'm understanding this of like,
in a controlling fashion.
Yeah, like in a controlling fashion. Exactly. Like if you told the neighbor kid you pay him $50 to shovel the driveway and the walk and all that, then when he's done, pay him the money. Obviously, it didn't snow in Israel, but you get the idea. Like, don't make the kid have to come back in a week and go, hey, you said I would have some money if I did this work for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, as people who are supposed to be set apart from the world, the Israelites needed to be able to trust each other.
Yeah.
So if you mistreat your neighbor, that's going to break the trust of the community, and it's going to make it that much more difficult to live in a place that's already difficult to live in. So quit making things harder for yourselves.
True. And if you're, you build this reputation of someone who makes big promises and then never delivers, that also hurts how you can function within the community as well, because that's kind of another way to look at the whole, if you owe someone money, don't go to bed, pay them the money. Like you're promising something and then not delivering. You're not a person of your word then.
Yeah, especially they were working under a system of being paid daily.
Right.
Like, it's real evil is really what I would use to not value that same system if that's what you're working under. And a boss who needed to pay their employees their wages when they earned them was never to withhold them because it's evil. Their pride and greed just came to the point of causing that situation. And that was supposed to be something they were never supposed to do, because they started mistreating their workers, who are the ones who are making them their money, by the way. They failed to act responsibly. So that's why God is like, nope, no loopholes for any of you. I know what you're about. Here it is, plain as day.
And then immediately we make a sharp turn to don't knock over blind people. Or deaf. I guess we go to deaf people first. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind.
It's so blunt. It's like, well, they don't know what I'm saying to them. I can say whatever I want. There's no Israeli sign language. Hey, Bobbius, watch what I do to Josephus over here. And just walks forward and you kick something in front of him. It's like, how evil is that? It's like, it's not even like YouTube prank worthy. It's just, just evil.
You remember how in the VeggieTales Jonah movie, to depict Nineveh, they were slapping each other with fishes instead of all the actual atrocities they were doing? That's kind of what this is, though. It's like, don't be a jerk to people with disabilities. Like, if someone has an issue, don't take advantage of that for your own personal gain.
It's difficult now in certain respects. Yeah, we moved way forward with technology and with other things like Braille and sign language that can help people interact with the world in ways they couldn't before. But this is back then where those things don't exist. Mm-hmm. So they have no help. They can't do normal wages in the same way other people can, who are more able-bodied in that way. They need help. They need to be protected. And so God put that in the law and put specific examples. Like, it's kind of comical in a way to think of trying to trip someone who's blind. But what to actually do it, though, is you're like, no, I would never laugh at that. I would probably punch that person in the face. It's like, how could you do that?
Because again, we're kind of following this thread right now of you in the community, right? We had like very specifically like this one thread of God making his people distinct from Canaan. But we have this other thread now of community. You are a nation. You are a people. And so be good to each other. Take care of one another. Don't take advantage of one another. Pay someone their wages and don't curse John because he can't hear you. Don't do that.
It serves no purpose other than to be cruel, which is anathematic to what we're supposed to be. It's be holy like I am holy. You don't see God doing that to him.
Some people would probably say, no, God is a cruel prankster, but come on. You're going to push a blind guy over a log? That's low. That's a low blow right there. All right.
Are you ready to move on to 15?
I'm ready.
16?
Let's do this. Yeah.
Okay. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. But in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people, and you shall not stand up against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord.
Law stuff. Here we go. Law stuff within the law. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great. That's how the NIV puts it. But judge your neighbor fairly. Again, looking at this through the lens of neighborly community. We just had this moment a little bit ago of like, hey, take care of the poor. But what's interesting here is that means it's weird. It's like God is telling them, you still have to play it fair in court. If the poor really did do something that took advantage of, if they pushed a rich blind guy over a log, they need to be held accountable for that. Which is interesting because, what'd you say?
No, I'm saying absolutely. Could continue.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is that I think now, and here I will now critique social justice, since I made good of it earlier. I will now critique it because a lot of times I think some people, not all, but some people do kind of get into this place where the poor and the marginalized are always right, and there are no good rich people. Now, in a capitalistic system, they might have a little bit, like a 99.9% point, but we still want to handle this fairly. We still want to handle it fairly, especially within the community mindset of loving our neighbors, taking care of those in the church, and dealing with issues that come up in the church without showing favoritism. James, he does talk about it more when it comes to the rich, but James in his epistle talks about how when someone who is rich comes in for service, don't give them the best seat in the house. Don't show them favoritism. Don't show them partiality at the expense of everybody else. So we still do have this approach. We should still have this approach as believers to treat one another fairly. That's basically what we're getting here, is different examples of how to treat one another fairly.
As if I needed you more on my side, you got to bring up my favorite book of the whole Bible. like James just speaks it away. It's like, hey, idiots, I love you. Do this. And then just says, here's exactly what you need to do. And that's God is much kinder in this regard. He's saying, hey, here's what you do. Mm-hmm. There's that concept and the idea of like, well, if they're poor, that means I should show them special favor because they've suffered enough, haven't they? Well, if that poor guy has been videoed, hitting someone in the head with a 2x4, it's the same as if you have a video of a rich person doing the exact same thing. Like, if you're going to go for absolute justice here, who committed the crime? It does not matter their status in society. It does not matter what led up to that. There are really no extenuating circumstances to go, well, it was okay that he did that. Like, outside of like maybe a self-defense case, that'd be completely separate from this. This is someone actually willingly doing it. And like, judges are supposed to be the absolute arbiters of justice in the land. So to be impartial because of their status in society revealed they had no true justice in their hearts. And as we go through the prophets way later on, this is brought up multiple times. You judges aren't doing your jobs. You are favoring one over the other.
Yeah. Even Jesus, one of his parables, I think it's in Luke 18, he talks about the widow who's been like defrauded and keeps coming to the judge, and it's just coming over and over and over again. And the judge keeps sending her away over and over and over again. And finally, the judge goes, look, I haven't changed my mind. I don't care about you, but I'm tired of you showing up. So you can have your justice, and I think that does transition well into like our modern day system, modern day issues of this does get more complicated. God is laying out to Israel a holy law. We in America, sorry, international listeners, we do not have a holy law from God. Our systems do favor people, do harm people. So it does make this whole thing more complicated. It's not necessarily a one-to-one comparison here. But there is still this truth in the end of how do we not show favoritism while also taking care of people. We have to be able to do both. We have to hold both at the same time.
Well, it also calls out people who would take advantage of that by just coming into court and lying and slandering people.
Sure.
It's like, because to do that is to defy God's justice. It is to bring your own will into the world because maybe you've been paid off, or maybe I might get favor from this rich person if I say the poor person did it instead. Like, all that proved is that your words were false and held no merit. So if you wanted to be treated seriously, don't do this.
Yep.
Be holy like I am holy.
I prefer there was another verse, wasn't there?
I am the Lord. Yep.
Oh yeah, you also read verse 16, didn't you? Man, we got so fired up about 15. I forgot about 16.
It's all good, man.
I got to refresh myself. Do not go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Okay. So still kind of this same kind of thing of lying, but very specifically in like a slanderous kind of way.
Yes.
Like don't go around just like spreading dirt about smearing mud on your neighbor's name. Okay. I totally forgot we did verse 16.
Well, now that we've discovered 16, how about we go to 17 and 18?
Let's do it.
All right. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Brandon, that's where that verse comes from. That verse everyone loves to talk. That's not John 3:16.
Right. Or Ephesians 2:8 and 9. Yeah.
Or Jeremiah 9:11.
or Jeremiah 29:11. Yeah. Can you pause for 1 second? Can you pause the recording for 1 second?
All right, we're back. Had a little fall on Brandon's side of things. Producer Cooper decided he wanted to be a boy, and what boys do is they fall and hurt themselves. But he would say, okay, you may hear him wailing in the background every now and then, but it seems like maybe things are calming down.
Things are calming down for sure. Thankfully, SpongeBob's on. Yeah, he took a spill. Our new house, of course, with it being a new house, is mostly empty, and it's hardwood floors. So every fall sounds like, falling off of a skyscraper. But yeah, he's okay. No blood, no broken bones. So we move forward.
No hospital visits.
No hospital. That was my big thing. It was like, okay, do I need to go? Yeah, but we're all good. We are all good. Let us get back to Leviticus 17 and 18.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. Being frank with your neighbor. Oh yeah, we were talking about loving your neighbor. We're talking about this is where this comes from. What do you know? Buried here in the book of Leviticus, right just after God had said to not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone, but love your neighbor. No vengeance. No vengeance.
Weird that. It's also like almost Jesus didn't invent that phrase in the Sermon on the Mount either, about not being angry with your brother in your heart. Almost like he, as God, had already put it here earlier.
Right.
Like there was present, like he was building off of what had been made before.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that actually comes up a lot in the Sermon on the Mount. You have all these instances when Jesus is saying, you have read that it's this, I'm going to show you the greater fulfillment of this, or Paul writes about how we aren't supposed to let the sun go down on our anger. I think modern Christians they love the not spiritual gift of anger. They love the fact that anger isn't part of the fruit of the Spirit. Just a reminder. Like anger is such like this cherished thing. Well, Jesus showed righteous anger. Here's the thing, though. Pursuing holiness is hard enough. Sometimes I think righteous anger is just as hard for us. Is it possible? Is it possible? Probably, maybe. But I think with how complicated the world is, how complicated sin is, how complicated I am as a person, I could still go forward with the right intentions and be angry righteously and still falter. Instead, maybe I should just continue to really focus on the thing that does come up a lot and love my neighbor.
Yeah. And this whole thing, it's just introduced like almost out of the blue until you go, oh, no, wait, in context, that makes perfect sense for everything we've just talked about. If I want to be holy like God is holy, I need to love my neighbor as myself. It's easy to love me. Yeah, even people who are struggling, with self-doubt or imposter syndrome or something like that. Like at the end of the day, you can argue it's pride saying I deserve better, or I need to be like this, or I should be like that. And so it's a self-love in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder to love someone as yourself because I'm number one. I mean, they're not Christian, Ashley. What do I have to give them?
Yeah. It's almost like God was creating a culture, a community with a community mindset versus one that was obsessed with individuality and personal freedoms. It's almost like there's two different things going on here, and one of them was the way God wanted it to be.
Now, Brandon, it is my right as an American to pick what part of the Bible I like and which part I don't.
It is my right as an American to disagree with you.
But no, it's like, that be angry. We hear that lesson from Jesus at the temple. Like, be angry when you see sin. Yes, you should. Mm-hmm. But don't let that anger turn into hating your neighbor.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for me. Like I probably use this illustration every time this is brought up, but like human trafficking just ticks me off in ways I can't even like express into words. Like, how could you ever do that to another human being, another image bearer? And like that turns from this is wrong, this is an injustice, something needs to be done, into I can't wait till that sucker's dead who does something like this, or I'll pull the trigger myself. And that's a very dark way to go. It's turning from there's an injustice in the world, I'm supposed to fight against that injustice, into I'm going to be part of the problem myself.
Yeah. There's and there's people who have justified that. There's the well, his nickname is the Machine Gun Preacher. I can't think of his real name now, but it's there was a whole movie made about him starring Gerard Butler that he was a missionary down in Sudan during the most recent civil war back in the early 2000s and all that. And he basically built a military bunker to rescue kids. Okay. And also to kill any militants who were getting in his way in the process of rescuing these children. And that's where the debate starts.
Yeah. It's like, you could argue all day, well, it's really loving my neighbor to make sure he can't kill someone else. And that's why it's justified. But then you go, well, now you've just condemned that person to hell because you didn't give him a chance. And then there's a person to go, well, they had their chance before God. Now God's judgment has been brought. I'm the punisher. I can do whatever I want. Call me Frank Castle.
Call me Frank Castle, basically. Yeah, no, it's, in other places, I think this comes up in the prophets, God is the avenger. God is the one carrying out the judgment. And, I don't call myself a pacifist. I'm not there, or at least I'm not there yet, as I continue to kind of explore my faith, expand my studies. But again, Sermon on the Mount, be a peacemaker.
Yes.
It's hard to rationalize I'll put it this way. It's hard for me to rationalize certain forms of violence if I am called to be a peacemaker. Keyword there being certain. Could we eventually find an exception? Probably, but it may take a moment.
Yeah, I consider myself to be a martial pacifist. That is, okay. I would do everything in my power not to fight, but you push too far. There's no other way out. You back me into a corner, guns a-blazing.
Sure.
Now, I need to be very careful about that because I can justify anything if I really want to. I can even justify and say, well, it's holy that I did this because taking them out really helped love my neighbor because now they don't have to worry about them anymore. And that's when you kind of end up in the Dexter killing serial killers kind of manner. And it doesn't really do well for the soul to go down that path. It's one thing you got to be constantly vigilant. Make sure I am not following that same path of what I despise.
Imagine
he who fights monsters.
Oh yeah. Imagine a dark reboot of Bible Man, but it's that Frank Castle approach. Just imagine that one for a second. And it can be Willie Ames if that helps put the idea over. Also, just to clarify something, as a martial artist, just because you do something, just so you know, people in listener land, just because you do something in self-defense doesn't mean you get off scot-free either. Okay, just doing something in self-defense isn't like this literal get out of jail free card. There is ramifications for that. Okay, that's nothing theological. That's just the law.
Free legal advice of the episode in the midst of legal advice.
In the midst of biblical legal advice, here's some. I'm not even the lawyer. Josh is he's not yet, but I keep calling him a lawyer, and it makes him it makes him a little flustered.
He's working on it.
We're rooting for you.
Along with the other podcasts and his fake wife and everything else. Oh, I haven't told you that. I've never seen his wife in person. So every time I've gone to his house, she's not there. She's conveniently, she's on a trip to London or whatever. So I was okay. Yeah, sure. How much can you pay that wife to show up into your photos there? What does she charge by the hour?
Right. Who is this Instagram model? That's funny. I did not know that. That's hilarious.
So anyways, 17 and 18.
Let's do it. Or is that what we're on now?
Is there anything else you wanted to add before we move to 19?
No. I think I'm good. Let's keep going.
Okay. You shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your cattle breed with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed, nor shall you wear a garment of cloth made of two kinds of material. Now, Brandon, obviously what this is saying is that, races need to stay together because God doesn't like interbreeding.
So here's the thing. I'm from the north, you're from the south, so I know this is funny. I know you're doing a bit here. But yeah.
More than zero, which is what it should be.
Yeah. So here's my initial walk away from verse 19 is this is one of those times where God, man, the racist thing wasn't even like on my mind, because I have heard people say, oh, so if you're wearing a t-shirt with two different kinds of material, you're sinning. And not like a Christian saying that, but like, that guy, that like atheist guy, not like the nice atheists who are just
to him from another atheist guy.
Yeah. Yeah, not like the nice atheists who are just like, look, I just don't care, but like the troll ones, and it's like, no, this is there a plan and a purpose behind all this? There's probably some like cultural thing going on here of like, I'm not a farmer. Maybe I'm not supposed to sow my field with two seeds. I don't know. I'd have to go look that one up for myself. I guess it would make sense not to plant carrots and lettuce in the exact same spot. But
I suppose.
But I guess, I guess we should talk about how races can marry each other.
It boggles the mind because, like, most of the churches, every single church that I've been to as a member, I have never once heard this because they're pretty good Bible believing churches that would never tolerate any of this. It's other people that I have met who would try and justify it, be like, well, it says right there, you're not supposed to mix. Mixing's bad. It's like, you can find an agenda from any of these verses if you really, really want to. And
sure,
what your great grandpappy told you about, that your black neighbor down the street doesn't justify you trying to go into scripture and saying, well, obviously what great grandpappy said is fine, because he builds it off of stuff like this rather than the fact that he just hates another man because he's different than him.
Right. Also, not even specifically mentioned here. Let's just reiterate that.
Yeah, you got to do a little work there.
You're
I
really.
I mean, it's kind of impressive in its own way.
Yeah,
impressive.
Your hermeneutics is so bad. You really crossed the principalizing bridge on this one, bud. That was a far walk off of that bridge. Keep my decrees. Do not. I guess it does say do not mate with different kinds of animals, but I'm not going to crossbreed a chicken with a horse. So, I mean, some of this is just like, I know I'm giving like extreme examples, but some of this is still kind of like in the realm of common sense. Like, do you want healthy animals? Breed them together then. You want good crops? Keep them separate. Do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material. I'm assuming what that means is not so much the whole polyester and cotton and blah, 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 but like, don't take an old garment and patch it together with like a brand new garment kind of thing. Kind of like when Jesus talks about the wineskins later on,
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe
part of it.
Yeah. So like,
what I've seen most commentators say is some of these sound like Canaanite, not beliefs, but just part of their everyday society, and they weren't supposed to do it. But also, if you would go back all the way to Exodus and we see the priests' uniforms, they are made of two different fabrics. Mm-hmm. So there's a suggestion there as well that is special to them because they're doing a special job of intermediating between God and the people. So they are the only ones who can do that.
Aren't they special?
Yes.
But they are. They're the priests. Like, the answer is yes. So that's interesting. I did not know that about the priest garment aspect. I must have missed that detail before. So yeah, are there
ephod? I can't read that.
Okay. So are there very specific instances where God doesn't want there to be mingling? Yes, but with a specific purpose. Can people of different races marry each other? Again, unless you take you're right, that's true. Unless you're going to take a really long derailed walk in your hermeneutics, I guess eventually you can figure that out. But sometimes you do. It's not always the best practice, especially when you're reading English of a book that was written in Hebrew. But sometimes just take it at face value. Like
sometimes that helps.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Do your work. If you have questions, question it. Never will you hear me say, never doubt this book. Like, I don't hate you. That's why I don't say that. Like, bring reasonable doubt into this scenario. Like, what is it actually saying? What have other people said? Which one do I believe? Which sounds more like God?
Yeah. And you know what? If you still haven't, and if you still have questions, obviously send it to Will Rose at Holy Trinity.
Who will actually be on the episode after this.
Oh, nice.
For Leviticus 21 and 22.
Perfect.
Well, how about verses 20 through 22?
Let's do it.
If a man lies sexually with a woman who is a slave assigned to another man and not yet ransomed or given her freedom, a distinction shall be made. They shall not be put to death because she was not free. But he shall bring his compensation to the Lord, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, a ram for a guilt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering before the Lord for his sin that he has committed, and he shall be forgiven for the sin that he has committed.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that was something.
Bit of a doozy.
So if a man sleeps with a female slave who is promised to another man, but who has not been ransomed or given her freedom, there must be due punishment, yet they are not to be put to death because she has not been freed. Oh, so what is interesting here is that there is provision made for somebody who probably in other cultures would not have provision made for. Because the woman in this scenario, in this very specific scenario, is not to be put to death, which would obviously be like the final judgment for somebody. But instead, there is another avenue that is taken in order to sacrificially purify those who are guilty. Interesting.
Yes.
I like it. It's almost like when a woman is caught in adultery, you're not just supposed to stone them. Shout out to the New Testament. Not right off the bat. Like, don't just start chucking.
The law we don't have to worry about anymore. Yeah. Also, forgetting that there was also a man involved in that circumstance. So it's not just the woman's fault. Even if she chooses to do it, there's also a man who chose to be a part of that.
Yes.
So it's almost like you have two people at fault outside of this scenario where there's only one person at fault from a woman who couldn't defend herself. So now the law is making a way for her to be safe from what would rightfully happen had she been in a situation where she had power to do something like this of her own accord.
Good stuff. Good stuff, God.
And then the man is supposed to make an offering in front of the people for this crime. The people are going to know what that crime is being covered by the sacrifice. So almost like it's supposed to be shameful to act in this manner.
It's like the guy is supposed to wear the scarlet letter.
Ooh.
What do you know? Take that, Puritans. Take that, Puritan culture. When people in power abuse people who have no power, the people of power should have to bear the public shame. What do you know?
Wow. All right, 23 through 25. When you come into the land and plant any kind of tree for food, then you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden to you. It must not be eaten. And in the 4th year, all its fruit shall be holy, an offering of praise to the Lord. But in the 5th year, you may eat of its fruit to increase its yield for you. I am the Lord your God.
I'm no gardener, but I have been apple picking for 30 years of my life. And this one makes total logical sense. You don't want to eat the fruit off of a tree that's only 3 years old. Like that
it's
fruit isn't, it's not ready. Like this one is, again, like there are times where it's like very plainly like God is doing something simple here. You people may not know this, talking to Israel, but this fruit is not ready to go. So don't touch it for 3 years. Presumably that 4th year, when it is ready to go, give it to me as your first fruits offering. This is something that comes up often throughout the law. The first, the best goes to the Lord. And then afterwards, eat away. Nice and simple.
Is it? Yeah. Like what you said, he forbade it because it allowed them time to grow. But this also forced the Israelites to trust him that it would eventually be bountiful and grow, because we are such, what's the word here? Instant gratification kind of people. It doesn't matter the decade, doesn't matter the century. That's what people are.
True.
We go, I want, I'm going to take. And yet, in the law, no.
Impatience is a timeless bad habit. Being impatient is a timeless bad habit. And yeah, God is providing for them. Just don't touch it. Don't touch it for 3 years. 4th year, give it to me. Year 5, enjoy. I am the Lord your God.
It's yours from now and evermore.
Yeah. Love
There's
it.
a hidden implication there. All right. 26 to 28. You shall not eat any flesh with the blood in it. You shall not interpret omens or tell fortunes. You shall not round off the hair on your temples or mar the edges of your beard. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead or tattoo yourselves. Sorry, Joe, you're going to hell. I am the Lord.
Christian, do you know why I picked these 2 chapters? There's more,
away, my friend.
There's more coming up in the next chapter too, like this. Yeah, so this one I would have to assume is very directly dealing with things that are going on in Canaan. Because what it seems like here is we have very specifically a call not to engage in some forms of pagan practices of witchcraft. Specifically, these practices, the very obvious ones of divination and seek omens. So don't try to get like special secret knowledge through psychic means, from the dead, all of that. It's all this other stuff that wars have been fought over. And I myself am guilty, for I have trimmed the edges of my beard. So let's get into this, Christian.
For those you don't know, I mentioned Joe Day, Buddy Walk with Jesus, a tattooed man, a friend of ours, mutual. Brandon actually did, 3, 4 straight weeks with him?
Yeah, 3. It was 3.
Yeah.
And we're setting up to do another batch as well. We'll see how many weeks it turns into.
Excellent. But yeah, Joe would have been the kind of person in certain churches I grew up in who would have been turned away.
Yes.
Most of the churches I've been in, this would never have been the case. But I can think of one in particular. And it was, your typical, this is what you're supposed to look like. You're supposed to dress up. You're supposed to look good for God. Give him your best.
Yes.
And that's obviously not your best, because look at you. I mean, you had a mirror at your house, right? I mean, God plainly says no tattoos. I mean, you've had to put money and effort into looking like this way. You're clearly just away from God. There's no way you could ever come to him.
Emphasis on the money part there. These things are cheap.
But this whole thing is like, yeah, you're right. These are Canaanite practices. They did them for ritually, cutting themselves was a way of mourning the dead. It's an expression of this, like, I'm cutting myself because I'm in that much grief. I have to let the pain leave my body, which was another way of bringing up, not treating the blood in your body well, which Leviticus has gone over several times. Don't eat the blood. Don't these things. Blood is life. Don't have to reiterate that. But you're doing this in a way of worshiping something that isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
Out of false faith, out of false cultural ideas. So don't engage in it. This isn't saying all tattooing forever is banned.
Yes.
Right? No. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, or even like the very simple, like cut the edges of your beard or whatever it is, like around your temples or something like that. We do see a lot in Scripture how they mourn. They tear their garments, sackcloth and ashes. There is a practice that is apparently taken up at some point of rending the clothes, sackcloth and ashes versus this cutting practice. But you're right, like with this whole tattooing, you brought up the one side of like, you can't come to Jesus. Look at you like this. At the same time, I'm not too big of a fan of the pro argument of, have you heard this one of, well, my body's a temple and I need to decorate it. Not so much a fan of that one.
Find a happy medium, please.
Yeah. I'm like, let's find a happy medium here. I do think that when it comes to the tattooing aspect, just be intentional with what you're doing here, because that's what is going on. They are intentionally marking their bodies for a specific purpose. So if you are going to do that, just be intentional. Why are you doing this? That is to say, you don't have to only get Bible verses tattooed on your body, but maybe a zombie Homer Simpson isn't necessarily the best tattoo to get. Maybe not. I don't know. There still needs to be like a thought and a reflection going on here, I would say.
Obviously, if you're like having nude women drawn on you, that's I would call that a bad idea.
Not necessarily the best.
Heart with an arrow through it. It's like whatever.
Whatever.
I'll live.
Right. But yeah, this isn't the last time we're going to talk about this spooky pagan practices as we get into chapter 20. So I'll save some more of my thoughts for that. But yeah, Israel is called not to mess with this kind of stuff, both in a ritualistic kind of way or even in a going to them for answers kind of way.
Yes. Let's go through some of that depravity in 29 and 30.
Oh boy, here we go.
Do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution and the land become full of depravity. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord.
There's literally a Sublime song. That's the plot of verse 29. Anyway, I mean, come on. If you're going to be a good neighbor, let's go back to the good neighbor aspect for a second. If you're going to be a good neighbor, then I hope you're treating your daughters well. I hope you're treating your children well.
And I hope you're treating your neighbor's children well, that you would never act with them in this manner.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because temple prostitutes were a thing. And that's why we get to the Sabbath part next in reverence for the sanctuary. There's a connection there because the Canaanites most definitely used that as part of their practices, was making a little more cash. And there was a sexual slavery part of it as well that runs antithetical to God's design for how men and women should treat each other, and men, women and women, so on and so forth. So look at this. Don't do these things. That's why these are the reasons I'm wiping these people out. Or at least you're supposed to.
Right. And it's also like, hey, we're trying to not have to make laws later. Like the Pharisees will. The Pharisees are going to try. But like God's like trying to lay out as much as possible, probably all that he needs to lay out. So that way Israel can go into the land ready.
Yes. And that's why, like, next up, 31, do not turn to mediums or necromancers. Do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am the Lord your God. Because these people, like, we can argue all day whether magic is real. I would argue yes. Like, is there a satanic power behind it? I would also say yes. But like the idea behind what's happening here, if there's satanic power or not, is that you are attempting to enforce your will upon reality by learning of the future in a way that God has not said do. It was a very prideful attempt to control rather than submit.
Yes. And for those of you who are skeptical on the whole magic thing, let's not forget it worked, because Saul went to a necromancer, and that necromancer did conjure up Samuel. So again, if we're gonna be the kind of Christian who's like, the word of God is literal, it happened. Okay, so something happened there. Martin Luther would say it was actually Satan in disguise, but when you're reading the dialogue, that's not necessarily the case. So I think personally that when it comes to this witchcraft, witchcraft, pagan, and neo-paganism conversation with magic and all, that I think as Christians, we've like overcorrected in a way that we like.
Yeah.
We're just like Mermaid Man and SpongeBob and just yell evil, and like we don't engage with it at all, which is a terrible way to do apologetics. That's a terrible way to like learn how to take care of your neighbor who is a neo-pagan, which, by the way, is a very popular thing right now. So obviously, I don't think we should be dabbling in the dark arts in like some kind of John Constantine kind of way, but like kind of this like happy media. Yeah, everything I say is a pop culture reference. That's all it is.
Hey, there's a reason we were on the show together.
Right. There needs to be this happy place where we can learn about what's going on here, because it does feel very mysterious in like a bad way, like an ignorant kind of way.
Yeah,
we just slap it as bad, magic bad. Don't go buy it. Don't go near it. Or it's fake and not real.
That's if Christians even bother to say that it's real at all. And I'd argue your exegesis is really poor if you say that's just metaphor. The demons aren't real. There's no magic out there. There's no necromancy. And I think that's because people are afraid. Shout out to Foreign Saints podcast where Karai he interviewed me about my own spiritual attack I suffered. Like, I think that's genuinely part of the church just doesn't want to think about it because it opens up possibilities they don't want to consider.
It does. They
want there to be angels, but no demons.
No. Every sermon I've ever heard about Jesus casting out a demon, no one ever stops at the like possession part. Like, obviously we all know that a legion is a large Roman army, blah, 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 blah. But like, this person there's a bunch of demons inside of this person. Like, can we just stop and think about that one for a second? And no, we need to get to the part where the life change happens. That's what's most important, because we don't want to sit with the uncomfy part.
Because then things need to change, or my perspectives need to widen and broaden. I don't want that. I want simplicity.
Yeah. So do I, but you know what? You can't have everything. All right, what do we got next?
Oh, God. 32. You shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of an old man, and you shall fear the Lord your God. I am the Lord. Brandon, everything an old person says to you, you should listen to what they do and follow suit.
No, but I think you can still treat them respectfully. I think that's what we're trying to do here. I have had a hard time, and I don't know if this has been the case for you now as a divinity student as well. There are times where I have a hard time, this is a confession, listening to the words of older Christians, because sometimes it is very like, no, that's not biblical. I'm sorry you were taught that and have believed that your entire life, but that's not what the Bible says. That's not to say that not every old Christian is bad and wrong and all that. Like, I have my favorites, and I have people who in my life who I do look to who are older. But no, this isn't just like any old person who calls you a whippersnapper you should listen to. But you can still treat them with respect.
Yeah. Like, for instance, right now, in one of my preaching classes, one of my professors, who I dearly love, preaches in a way I will never preach, but I am in his class.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to submit myself to his authority, which I do want to do, I need to not just give him what he wants, but actually say, okay, here's how he explores things. How can I modify what I would regularly do to fit his model, not for the sake of just getting a good grade, but for the sake of honoring him, and then saying, hey, I am never going to act this way when it's my turn on the pulpit, but I can still learn from what you have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good approach. That is the right approach there. Especially when it comes to the homiletic side. But that's going to take me down a whole thing. So let's just keep going. I need to stay on the right track here.
Yes. We eventually need to end at some point tonight.
True.
33 and 34. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God.
Hey, don't forget where you came from. You were strangers in a foreign land, and I took care of you. So do that for others.
Yeah, Brandon, we have multiple friends who aren't, let's say, as inerrant and leaning as we are sometimes.
Okay.
Him who has claimed almost the entire book for himself. So you'll know who that is immediately.
Oh, okay.
And would say, hey, this wasn't actually written by Moses. And this is where it's just small parts like this. There's larger parts I would argue, but smaller parts like this get me. This law makes no sense if it didn't actually happen. If it wasn't written to the people of Israel who were literally in Egypt, literally as slaves, why would they care about treating the sojourner as because they were once foreigners in another land if they were never foreigners in another land?
True. I also don't know why God would keep bringing it. I don't know why God would keep bringing it up either.
Yeah, it's
because
there's the whole redacting and editing side of things, and we're going to create the mythology would be an argument made, but that's a lot of extra work, man.
That's a lot of extra work.
So sometimes you remember simplicity comment we had earlier. Sometimes it's just better to just they were in Egypt. Okay, yeah, treat people well because you were sojourners too. There you go.
Look, I'll say this when it comes to the whole mythology take on the Exodus. I'm not as well versed. Just gonna put it out there. And to me, I guess maybe both of you could make an argument one way or another. But to me, to get wrapped up over the exact literalness of all of this, whether it literally happened or it was this mythological story that Israel started passing down. In the end, the point here is it happened. It didn't happen. In the story, you were set free. So continue to do that. And that's why I'm not a good pastor. That's why I shouldn't be hired. Because for me, it's I'm not going to get, it's interesting and definitely worth the research. Don't get me wrong. But to me, I'm not going to get bogged down in that, because in either case, the point still remains. I do agree with you that from the side of it keeps coming back up, and there's a very specific mentioning here of foreigner kind of thing. I see what you're saying of so why else would God use that as an example here? It had to have happened, had to have been something that some of them could experience or have people that remember it experiencing. Yeah, that's why I'm not a good pastor, because sometimes I'm I don't care. There is, I have more.
I see your point.
You see my point? Yeah.
There's some things you gotta go. I don't know. I don't understand the Trinity. Okay,
Yeah.
there's a class devoted to the Trinity at this school. I've been in the systematic theology side of things. I don't understand the Trinity. I know it works. It's like a
know it
Bethesda game
works.
without the bugs. It just works.
I know it
And
works. I
that's okay.
like that. I'm going to start using that when I talk about the Trinity. I know it works, but I don't understand how it does.
It's like my car. I know nothing about cars except to make them go vroom and eventually stop.
Right.
It works. Therefore, I trust in it.
Sure.
Maybe not a perfect analogy because cars don't always work, but
Right. They might not go vroom sometimes.
35 to 37. You shall do no wrong in judgment in measures of length or weight or quantity. You shall have just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and you shall observe all my statutes and all my rules and do them. I am the Lord.
So here's my thing, and it's maybe a little bit less about the actual context of what was just said, and maybe a little bit more about the flow. Is it just me, or does it seem like this could have been grouped differently? Like we could have just had all of these like 10 commandment things here, and then we could have had like all the necromancer stuff here, and then it seems like we're kind of bebopping around a little bit. You know what I mean? Like here's all the love your neighbor stuff. Yeah. Like it sometimes it just feels a little choppy. That's just a plain. That's just me reading it kind of approach.
Yeah, because if you're just looking at it and say, okay, well, you thought it was here a second ago, now you're over here, and you came back over here. But maybe that was the point, to get their ears to perk up when they were listening to the law being read.
Maybe.
Oh, he repeated something he said earlier in a different way.
I guess that is possible. That is possible. I didn't think about that. But yeah, we're back on dishonest standards. Back doing dishonest standards here. Don't be dishonest.
Yeah, having fair trade in a country ensures the safety of the people and their economy, and is just meant to prevent greed from spreading into land, which no doubt was happening in Canaan and every other nation around them. Sure. But they're called not to be like that. So don't do it.
Agreed.
Simple enough. All right, time to get into 20, verses 1 through 5. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to the people of Israel, any one of the people of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn in Israel, who gives any of his children to Molech shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I myself will set my face against that man and will cut him off from among his people, because he has given one of his children to Molech to make my sanctuary unclean and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do at all close their eyes to that man when he gives one of his children to Molech and do not put him to death, then I will set my face against that man and against his clan and will cut them off from among their people, him and all who follow him in whoring after Molech.
Abortion is bad. That's what I know. That's what I know people use for that.
Yep. Oh, well, wait till we get to Numbers for Numbers 5. There's an abortion cure in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes on both sides.
It does. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, child sacrifices isn't a good thing. Just to be clear.
Yeah, there you go.
And I appreciate, I know I've said that a lot, but I appreciate that God clarified this one, because he did say earlier in the last chapter and other places of just me, this is my sacrificial system, and just worship me. Now, okay, here's an example of a sacrificial system and another God to have nothing to do with. And ramifications.
Doesn't mean Baal. Doesn't mean Baal's okay. Doesn't mean Osiris is okay. It's like, no. You know what's going on here.
Yeah. We know what's going. They know what's supposed to be going on here. And again, from this lens of taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, children are very vulnerable. You can overpower a child. Like, a grown adult can do such things. So God is providing provision to keep children safe.
It's like every time I go back home and the kids my mom are watching, it's quite easy to just pick them up and throw them on the couch.
Oh yeah.
Because they like being in the air. They like falling down in a fun manner on a soft object. I don't throw them on the floor, I swear.
Right. I don't throw kids, but like we do have one of those foam block pits at my job. So yeah, kids like jumping off of high things onto soft surfaces. Like, yeah. And I get to encourage them to do it.
Get paid to do it at that.
I get paid to encourage them to do it. I get to teach them how to do it.
Yeah. And like Brandon was mentioning, like this was not only the last chapter, but in chapter 18, God has a law of like one verse, hey, don't sacrifice children to Molech. Here is the expansion on that. So, yeah, some of these are meant as literal sacrifices. There was child sacrifices done in Molech's name. But others were more in the sense of forcing the children to work for the priests, sometimes as temple prostitutes who were forced to sell their bodies to bring in more money to the priests of Molech. So there's a dual sense here of don't do it that way, don't do it that way. It's all forbidden because you're not supposed to worship Molech in the first place.
Right.
Or verboten.
Yes, yeah, that one.
Sorry, I got my German. I never studied.
Impressive.
Right. 6 through 9.
Right.
If a person turns to mediums and necromancers, whoring after them, I will set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. Keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you. For anyone who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother. His blood is upon them.
Okay, so once again, we have this whole mediums and spiritualists thing. And a very strong language around it. Prostituting yourself to them. Very strong language. Whoring yourself after them. Like, this is very strong language. There is ramifications for not following the law. I think that's a little bit of what we're getting here is, talked about in the last chapter. Honor your father and mother. Now, this is what happens if you don't do that.
Yeah. And just looking at this, see, the strong language, that comes right off the page. Like, oh, that's how we're going to talk today. It's like, what's that one Ezekiel verse about them lusting after Egypt and, the size of their members, that is other words used there, were like large and stuff like that. It's like, that language is used not because God is being crass, but because he has a point he's trying to make here.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you are acting in this manner, in this reprehensible manner. I'm going to use this word to describe that manner because it is not what you're supposed to be doing. So don't go to your mediums and necromancers. Saul, when I leave you behind, maybe if you'd come back and repented, things would have changed. But instead you did something I explicitly said not to do. Other people said, hey, Saul, you're not supposed to do that. And yet you still went there.
Mm-hmm.
So who do you have to blame when things go wrong? Yourself. Just don't do these things. You're proving that you're faithless because you're doing something that's antithetical to worshiping God. Something he explicitly said not to do.
Mm-hmm. And even in that Saul story, like, he's not trying to get secret knowledge about God. He's trying to get Samuel back,
Yeah.
Like
who
you
we
said,
never listened to.
We never listened to. He's not trying to repent. He's not trying to get his act together. It's not anything. Like, he's just trying to go the easy route. Somehow the easy route is conjuring up a dead body, but we'll just let that one lie where it is. He takes the cop-out approach.
Yeah. It just baffles the mind. But once again, aren't we the same way with the other things God tells us not to do?
Sure.
And we have our blind spots. I mean, sure, I guess that's a weird blind spot to have. Don't go to mediums for Saul. But, I mean, we all have something that we just go, I don't pay as close attention as I should to preventing myself from heading that way. Or I know I don't, and yet I encourage myself to go because I enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. But I do want to bring up something here, and I will use the original Hebrew for this.
Let's do it.
So God here mentions, I think for the first time in all of Scripture, that he is the one who sanctifies the people when they follow him. Now, the Hebrew word used here is makadeskem, sure, which comes from the root word kadash, which means to be set apart or consecrated for something. Now, they as a people were to be set apart and consecrated for the service of God so that the nations could know who he was, that he was the only one worthy of worship. Now, this is also true of us. Now, he never said those words exactly to me, but at the same time, like in his service, I'm supposed to be actively working towards that sanctification of being better than I came when I started this whole shindig at 6 years old. Like, I should not be the same man that I was then, or same child I was then, to the man I am now. I'm about to turn 34. It'd be real sad if I remained static that whole time.
True. Interesting. I didn't know that was the first time that this came up.
I'm fairly certain that always go behind me and reference and correct me if I get anything wrong. Citation needed.
Oh yeah, we're recording a podcast. Sometimes we get going on these kinds of things and I forget that like people are going to listen to this.
Oh gosh. Well, you ready to talk about sex, Brendan?
Yeah, let's do it.
10 through 21. If a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. If a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be surely put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed perversion. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man takes a woman and her mother also, it is depravity. He and they shall be burned with fire, that there may be no depravity among you. If a man lies with an animal, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. If a woman approaches any animal and lies with it, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man takes a sister, a daughter of his father, or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace, and it shall be cut off in the sight of the children of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, and he shall bear his iniquity. If a man lies with a woman during her menstrual period and uncovers her nakedness, he has made naked her fountain, and she has uncovered the fountain of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from among their people. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister or of your father's sister, for that is to make one naked, is to make naked one's relative, they shall bear their iniquity. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless.
Just going to really cover the bases here.
It's like every loophole you can think of, I'm throwing it in there. No, and
there are
like before in 18, like, hey, don't do these things. It's an abomination. It's a depravity. It's a perversion. Here it's, oh, you do these things, you die, or you're cut off from the people. So it's a further expounding on what was said before. You were about to say something.
I was going to make a joke that probably shouldn't make the edit, but I'd say there are so many porn categories here. Like we need to like understand, like I'm going to say something that purity culture has ruined. God does take sex seriously. Okay. Like this is a true statement.
I need you to turn your chair around and sit and look at me.
Right. Hey kids, we've had a lot of laughs today.
But you're right.
Yeah, like I'm trying to avoid any more of the like usual like how church talks about this kind of stuff, but like it is evident that there are certain things that should not be done. There are certain sexual things, there are certain sexual relations that should not occur. And some of them you would think would be obvious. But again, rules exist for a reason. Like, we're not just like throwing things against the wall here. So, yeah, it's sad that we can't just have nice things. We just can't have nice things. But
no, we can't.
No, we cannot. We cannot have nice things. But we can rejoice that God takes this seriously and wants us to glorify him in this way.
Yes. I mean, this is where the world just sees that forbidding God. He doesn't understand the relationships of this world. He made us, so he made us for sex, and we can do whatever we want. And it's like, no, he did make certain people for that way. That's how naturally things are supposed to go between men and women. For some who are not called to singleness. But then we twist and turn what is meant for marriage, that wonderful sacred thing, and make it something it was never meant to be, for the sake of our own pride, our own lust. Anything. All these are built on the fact of, hey, I deserve, therefore I take. And there, I have seen with my eyes what I desire, I will go after that. And that has no place in a proper walk with God. It is, okay, here's how you've said this is supposed to be done. I either say yes to you or I say no.
And what's, interesting about this, so we have this whole like, be a good neighbor talk in the last chapter. And now we're seeing like, okay, but like, that doesn't mean you get to go sleeping with your stepsister and your aunt. And, like there is, because there is we were going to get here eventually, Christian. We've been talking long enough. There is a cult, Children of God. I think that's what that one's called. Where it's like they are encouraged to be sexual with each other and sexually explicit with each other in very abusive ways. We'll just leave it there, or then we're going to have to start putting trigger warnings up. Although we did just have bestiality a minute ago, so that did happen.
Yes, and we also mentioned Joshua.
So here's the getting back to this, like there, sure, like homosexuality does come up here, but it's almost like a small part of what is otherwise like relational sex. Like you have a wife, you have a husband, cool, just do it with each other and don't try to hook up with your mother-in-law. Like it's like this web of don't confuse what love is. Don't confuse what loving your neighbor is. Like assuming that everybody in these scenarios are consenting adults, because obviously that's important. Assuming that everyone's a consenting adult here in this scenario, like that doesn't matter. That is not what loving your neighbor looks like. That's not what sexual relations are supposed to look like. You have your partner, stay with your partner, and don't get freaky with the rest of your family.
Consent doesn't mean good. I can consent to evil things every day. I'm not free from sin. That doesn't mean just because I wanted to do it doesn't make it right.
True. Yeah. That was the biggest section we've.
Yes.
That was the biggest section we've done so far.
Well, you've had a very atypical episode because normally there's not those segments. Okay, these are definitely different things we need to talk about. Normally, Joshua's had to endure like, okay, here's this specific offering. So we go for 15, 20 verses.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So let's finish off today, 22 through 27. You shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my rules and do them, that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out. And you shall not walk in the customs of the nation that I am driving out before you, for they did all these things, and therefore I detested them. For I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has separated you from the peoples. You shall therefore separate the clean beast from the unclean, and the unclean bird from the clean, and you shall not make for yourselves detestable by beast or by bird or by anything with which the ground crawls, which I have set apart for you to hold unclean. You shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. A man or a woman who is a medium or a necromancer shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their blood shall be upon them. Oh, by the way.
But that is important because we have here, is that the second or third time that's come up in this chapter? Necromancers, that is.
The medium. That's if you include the omen stuff, like 3, I think. Maybe that was the previous chapter.
That may have been the previous chapter. But that's interesting to me. That's fascinating to me. That this just keeps coming up. In 2 chapters, we've been reminded 3 to 4 times don't go to a necromancer. Don't do it. Don't do those things. We did have this long soliloquy about all these sexual things you ain't supposed to do, but we're just going to keep coming back to don't go to a necromancer. Don't go to a medium. Like, that must have been such a thriving practice that God had to prevent, that God had to protect his people from,
Because that's exactly what they did. And they can't claim ignorance of the law, except when their priests weren't doing their jobs. That's a separate issue. But when the priests were saying, hey, don't do these things, and they went and did them, they have no one to blame but themselves. And it happens multiple times over. God, once again, all throughout the prophets, you look at, what are the prophets talking about? The people not keeping the law. And they will mention, hey, you don't have fair trade. Your judges are corrupt. You are going to mediums and necromancers. You are not listening to the Lord your God, which, by the way, is what all those things were about. Mm-hmm. So that's why he had to take you away, because you didn't keep up your part of the bargain. That's why this is a conditional covenant.
Yep.
Because seriously, you were meant to be set apart. Sorry. I know we've definitely had some internet issues. That's most definitely on my side for the seminary side. So Brandon and I have talked over each other multiple times. That's why I figured it out. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. What do you know? Sorry, everybody on the audio, on the listening side of things. But yeah, I remember what I was going to say, and they just read the law, like that's it. Like the priest read the law and then would make a comment. That was basically what preaching was originally. It was just read the law, make a statement about it, So it's not, again, when they're doing their job, like they can't even plead ignorance. And yeah, I know what the turn is. You're going to be like, and how often do we hear Bible passages about, and we still lie, cheat, and steal? Like, yes, Christian, I'm ahead of you on this one. We still do this. We don't have ignorance, other than we do have Jesus, which is, I just got done reading the book of Hebrews, which the book of Hebrews is just this beautiful exposition, this beautiful letter about how Jesus is greater than the old covenant, So more fulfilling covenant. So, yeah. But I'm just fascinated. That's part of the reason why I picked this chapter. These two chapters are just so fascinated how much this comes up. Don't go to a necromancer. Don't do it. I'm going to say it like a dozen times.
Yeah. What else is there to say? It's like, I can only tell you so many times. And if you don't listen, I mean, what am I supposed to do? If I'm this feeble God, just be like, oh, stop, don't do that. or if you are the God who made everything, God, the Almighty God, there's got to be punishment at a certain point in time. And it's not like God is like, yes, today's the day. It's no, this is a sad. This is something that has to happen in order for his glory to be made known in the world, that he is a God of love and a God of wrath at the same time, which, by the way, I brought up several times over in separate episodes for this series. The God of the New Testament is the God of the Old Testament. The fun-loving, free God, hippie God, and Jesus of the New Testament don't exist.
Hippie God.
Because they're right here. That love and wrath exist in the same God. He didn't change. And the people saw what happened as a result of that.
They will.
Yeah. But you got anything else you want to add, good buddy?
That is all I have. That was a marathon, man. You do this every episode? Yeah. Good for you.
I do when I have people who love to talk on, which I have several friends who love to talk.
Yeah, that's the problem with this group.
Yeah, third or fourth 2-hour-long episode-ish.
Shoo.
Last Friday I did 2, not back-to-back, thank God. Well, one with Joshua, one with my friend Karai Rowe, Foreign Saints. So that was fun, also very tiring. But yeah, Brandon, once more, tell the good people where they can find you.
Sure. Yeah. So, My Seminary Life and Kung Fu Pizza Party are both part of the Anazao Ministries podcast network. So, if you already like listening to Let Nothing Move You and you want to maybe get a little bit other theology takes in your digestion, or if you like martial arts stuff, you could just as easily find all of that on Spotify and Amazon Music and Apple Podcasts as well. My Seminary Life is on Facebook and Instagram at My Seminary Life Pod. Kung Fu Pizza Party is on Instagram at Kung Fu Pizza Party. And yeah, this is the best way to get a hold of me or the show at this point.
Yeah. Give that man a follow. Listen to what he has to say. I've enjoyed listening to everything that you've done.
Appreciate that.
You can't possibly waste your time with Brandon Knight.
I mean, what hour are we on here? Are we on 2 hours yet? Like, this is
we're getting there.
I hope we haven't wasted anyone's time.
And if you're still here, thank you for sticking around, even though we took those 2 hours away from you.
Yeah, really.
But guys, thank you. Thank you for all you do. Please, you get a chance, leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice to help us with the ratings there to find more people. If you're interested in my own fiction writing, you can find my work at starvingwritersguild.com or on Amazon by searching for the name MC Ashley. If you're interested in some further solid studies into the Bible and its teachings, then check out the other members of the Anazao Ministries podcasting network. You can find me specifically on systematic ecology, why I don't like, Friday Night Frights, and some joyful noises, and about 50 other things I want to do and can't do because I don't have the time. You can contact me at letnothingmoveyoupodcast@gmail.com. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Joshua Knoll for the editing that he does and for the music he adds to the podcast. And with all that in mind, God bless you in accordance to his will and not mine. And allow me one more time to remind you, let nothing move you.
Hey guys, are you interested in podcasting but don't know where to go? Well, check out Zencaster.com and go ahead and make an account there and use special promo code Let Nothing Move You, all caps. That way you can get 30% off of your next deal to go ahead and set things up so you can figure out how to edit stuff using Zencaster.com to host your stuff, to get things done there. So check out Zencaster.com, use special promo code Let Nothing Move You. All right, see ya.